Hey everybody, welcome back. Today I'm going to do a video about the time value of money, which I'm sure you've heard a lot about in your lifetime, but the time value of money and the military retirement. So if you utilize the time value of money and the military retirement, if you are going to join the military, you could be very financially well off by the time you are in your early 40s. So first off, I'll hit the time value of money aspect of it first. And I have three distinct examples of this that I've put together using fairly similar numbers so that you can compare them with each other fairly easily. So the idea behind time value of money is you put money away when you're young, and that money you put away when you're young is more valuable. Money you put away for investing in your future, investing in your retirement, the money you put away when you're young is way more valuable than putting that same amount of money away when you're older. So if you put away $1,000 into a Roth IRA or some kind of an IRA when you're 20, that $1,000 is more valuable than $1,000 that a 30-year-old would invest. The main reason is it has another 10 years. It has 10 years on that 30-year-old's $1,000 to grow. And in a decent investment, money will easily double in 10 years. One of the rules of finance is if you have a set amount of money in a investment and it happens to be at 10%, it will double in 7 years. So that's kind of like what we're looking at here. Now 10% is good. It's historically what the stock market has been hitting overall. So there are going to be highs and lows, valleys and peaks, things like that. But overall, just putting money in routinely is going to be your best bet to maximize that time value of money. So I have an example here. 3 people. I got Jack, I got Jill, and I got Frank. All these 3 scenarios start when these people are 20 years old. So they're going from their age 20 to age 64. Now let's start with Jack. Jack has a job. He's 20 years old, but he doesn't want to put any money away for retirement because, that's so long. It's so far in the future. He's 20 years old. He's going to be in his 60s before he's going to take this money out. It just seems so far away. He's not going to bother doing anything right now at the age of 20. So he works an entire 20 years. So he's working from the age of 20 to the age of 40, and he's not putting any away into his retirement account and for investments. So by the time he hits 40, he's like, oh, I really need to get in gear. In 20 years, I'm going to be 60, so I have to get some money for retirement so I don't have to work my entire life. So he decides to really crank it up, and he saves $12,000 per year. So that's $1,000 per month, and we're going to do a rate of 8% for this. So that first year, his $12,000 returns $995. And that's going to compound upon itself. And every year for 20 more years, he's going to put in $12,000 a year. And by the time he's 64, he will have put in $240,000 because he puts in $12,000 per year for 20 years. So that's $240,000. And what is he at an 8% return? That 8% is just compounded monthly. And by the end of that time, he has $240,000 invested, and his total is $873,842.05. So that's actually pretty good. So he's really cranked up his savings though, because he had to save $12,000 per year. So that's $1,000 a month. But he almost hit $1 million there by the time he's 64 with that 8% return. Now I want to bring your attention to Jill. So Jill is a responsible person, and she decides she's going to save $6,000 per year for her retirement, starting when she's 20 years old. So she's buckling down. She's putting away $500 per month into a retirement account. This could be the most likely thing is just a stock market index fund is how you can really get these returns pretty decently. So she's working, whatever job she's working, but she's just gonna, just for sake of simplicity, we're just gonna have her put $500 away every month. So that starts to grow. It compounds upon itself, and she continues to do that for 40 years. Not 20 years like Jack, but 40 years. So she does it all the way up until she turns 60. And now, after she's turned 60, she stops. And what you see here is that she has over $2 million. $2.5 million after that 20 years. When she's 64, she pulls it out and she has $2.5 million. So, thing to know here at this point is both Jack and Jill have invested $240,000. Now, since Jill started investing less amounts of money when she was younger, she now have more time for that money to have interest and compound upon itself, leaving her with much more than Jack had. So, but she's invested the same amount. So that's a clear example of the time value of money there, how it's advantages for Jill because Jill started investing early. Now I'm going to do a little bit of a different thing here. I'm going to do Frank. Now Frank, example is he's going to start off nice and early in his working life, just like Jill did. So he's going to start off by putting $6,000 away every year. So $500 a month, just like Jill did. But the difference here is Frank is only going to do this for the first 20 years. Then he's going to stop, and he's just going to let that money grow on its own. So as you see here, by his 20th year, Frank has $297,000, $361.11. It's the same as what Jill had at that point. So they've done the same thing. They've both gotten 8% from their investments. It's comparing apples to apples here at this point. But now, once he turns 40, he stops. He says, I'm not going to invest any more money from my paycheck into my retirement. I'm just going to let that money grow. So he does that. He does not put any more money in it, but we're assuming that he's still going to continue to get 8% of a return every year. So at the end of this, when he turned 64, just like when Jill was 64, he has $2,036,470.18. And as we mentioned, Jill has over $2 million as well. But the difference here is about $500,000. So Jill has an extra $500,000. But the takeaway here is that Frank only invested $120,000 over the lifetime of his investing, whereas Jack and Jill both put in double that at $240,000. So by only investing $120,000, but investing it early in that first 20 years of his working life and then stopping, he is pretty much on par with Jill, who continued to do it. So what the point is, investing it early is the wisest thing to do because it gives your money time to compound. So what that tells us also is that Jill's last 20 years of investing was not nearly as important as her first 20 years of investing. It only ended up getting her ahead of Frank by $500,000, which is still a lot, but she put in an extra $120,000 of principal. So this is why the time value of money is important. You might hear financial guys say this, financial advisors, et cetera, et cetera. This is a way I can describe it in a real world sense, just comparing apples to apples. Obviously, maybe somebody wants to get, there's really no get rich quick thing here. You have to be disciplined and structured in your life to make sure you're living within your means and putting away this money every month. You might think you can go out and buy some crypto and become a millionaire overnight, but it's not going to happen to the vast majority of people out there. So this is a great surefire way of getting your wealth going. All right, so where's to next? Now I'm going to talk about the military retirement. Now I have mentioned this before in another one of my videos on military benefits, but the current military retirement plan is that you get 2%. Well, the current military retirement plan is you can only retire with a pension once you've done 20 years in the military. And for every year that you're in the military, that's 2% towards your retirement. So if you do 20 years in the military, you get 40% of your base pay for the rest of your life. Now, in my case, I was under the previous program where you get 2.5% for every year. So I get 50% if I do 20. And that continues on. So if you're under the current system and you do 20 years, you're going to get 40% of your base pay. If you do 25 years, then you're going to get 50% of your base pay. And it keeps going on until most people don't stay in the military longer than 30 years, but some do. If you got a mix of enlisted time and officer time, you could easily go over 30 years. But usually that's as long as people have in the military is 30 years. So anyway, what I have here, also before I go any further, so I have that 40% for the pension. But if you don't stay in for 20 years, the military is also going to give you a kind of a 401k type thing, which we call the TSP, which stands for the Thrift Savings Plan. In the Thrift Savings Plan, the military will match anything you put into your TSP. They'll match it up to 5%. So you put in 5% of your pay, they put in 5%, you've already doubled your money right there. It's a fantastic deal. No one should be in the military and not do at least that 5% into their TSP, because that is just, you're losing money if you don't do that. I have an example of what we have here is an enlisted retirement individual. So this is someone who joined out of high school and who's going to be enlisted for 20 years. And I'm assuming they're going to stay at the same place. So my BAS is always going to be the same, or sorry, my BAH is going to be always going to be the same locality. It's going to go up as you go up in rank, but it's always going to be the same area code for this example. And the BAS will always be the same. It's what it is right now. It does go up with inflation. Housing goes up with inflation as well. But for this example, I'm keeping these all just in this year's current rates. So as an A1C, you're going to make $28,000 a year in base pay. You're going to get about $22,000 in housing if you're living off base. If you're living in the dorms, well then of course you don't get that at all. BAS is $5,000. This is per year, by the way, not per month or anything like that. So you'll get $5,000 per year in BAS, which is food. And again, you're not going to get that unless you're living off base on your own in the dorms. You live for free and you eat for free. So they don't count that. So your base pay, your housing, and your basic allowance for subsistence gets you at $56,000 for that first year, and you're going to put away 8%. You're going to put away 10% of that. So you're going to put away 5%, and the military is going to put away 5%. So you're going to put 5%. The military is going to be 5%. So 10% of your base pay goes in there. All right. Now you're going to continue to do that. Just that 5% with the 10% that the other 5% that the military matches. So we're going to continue on. I have us as being as Airman First Class, which is an E3 for the first 3 years. I have us being a Senior Airman for the next 3 years. We're a Staff Sergeant for the next 5 years. Tech Sergeant for the next 4 years. And then for the remaining 20, I have 22 years actually, we're going to be a Master Sergeant. And I have all these in here. So if you see this chart here, as you go through, you can see the money being compounded. That 10% of your base pay every year is being compounded on itself and it's growing. And so by the time you get to retirement age-ish, you're going to have, say you retire at 22 as a Master Sergeant. If you got 10% of your base pay every year and you're going to get 8% interest, you're going to have $267,000 in that account by the time you are in for 22 years. So that means you're about 40 years old. If you joined at 18, you're 40. And you have that 40% pension, and also you have this $267,000 TSP. So obviously you can't take the TSP out yet because it's a retirement account. So you can't take it out until you're 59 and a half. So we're just going to leave that in there. I'm assuming this person maybe gets another job. Maybe they can live frugally on what their pension is, maybe not. But say I don't have any other income here. So we'll say whatever they make, whatever they're earning, they're just spending it all. They're not contributing anymore at this point to any kind of a a retirement fund. They're just going to let this one grow. The TSP is going to keep growing. So here we are at the age 59 when you can finally take that out. So at 59, you're still getting your pension every month, which is 40% of $71,000. And that actually also does go up with inflation. I have these bumped up for inflation each year, by the way. That's why we get up to 50,000. This is what your pension is going to be. Now, by the time you're 59, you can pull from this fund now. It's 1.2 million, and you also have your pension from the military. So it's a pretty good deal, and you can be set up pretty well depending on what other choices you make throughout down the line. Say, for example, every time you move from one base to another base, you buy a house at the new base, and then when you leave that base, you rent that house to somebody else, and then you buy a new house. So then by the time you retire, you might have like 6 houses all across the country that you're renting. Now those houses are going to eventually be paid for because they're going to be on maybe a 20-year, which I always do 15-year mortgages, but if you can't do a 15, you can do a 20-year or 30-year, obviously. And so as houses start to get paid for, that's another source of income that you're going to get by the time you're in your 59. A lot of your houses will be paid off, and that'll be straight income. So that's another way to make money as well that some people do. All right, so let's look at the other side. Let's look at the officer side here. So I have us here as an officer starting off as a second lieutenant when we would be 22 and continuing on to the rank of lieutenant colonel. Again, also doing 22 years, and so we would be 44 by the time this example gets through. So as a second lieutenant, your base pay is $47,700. Housing in the same locality as the previous example is going to be $26,000 a year, and you're going to get food allowance, basic allowance for subsistence, which is $3,800 a year, which totals $77,000 your first year. Now I have that 10%, like I mentioned before with the enlisted example, that 10%, that's going to give us 10% plus 8% interest for the year is going to give us $5,161 for that first year. And as we go through, you're going to go up in rank. You're a second lieutenant for 2 years. You're a first lieutenant for 2 more years. And then you're a captain typically for about 6 years. So by the time you hit year 10, that's when you put on major. And you're going to be a major for about 6-ish years. And then, about 6 years and before you get lieutenant colonel. 6 or 7. Well, I think I might have 7 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I have 7 years as a major. So now, by the time you are 42 as a lieutenant colonel, you say, okay, I did 20 years in the Air Force. I'm a lieutenant colonel. I'm not going to go on to be a full bird. I'm not going to be a general someday. I'm just going to go ahead and punch and retire. So what you have there is you're going to get 40% of, or actually not 40%, it's going to be 44% because you did 22 years. So it's 44% of your base pay, which is a pretty good salary to live on, as you can see there. And then your TSP over here in the right column is going to keep building on itself. So I'm going to do the same thing as this example as the other example. Whatever money you're going to make from now on, you're just going to spend it all. So I'm not putting it in this table. You're just going to let the money grow, and your pension is going to grow at about 2% per year for your inflationary raise. Now, as you can see, we're going to go from $500,000 when we were 43 years old to $2.4 million by the time we're 63. So this is the time we're going to start pulling that money is at 63. I know I used 59 on the other example, but since you had 4 years of college, and so this officer started later than the enlisted person, so then I'm going to add on to that. So we're going to do 63 or 62. Either way, it's to the 2.2 million or it's 2.4 million. And you're still going to be getting that pension there. So this is much more comfortable, obviously. We have $93,000 of a pension per year after inflationary bumps every year. And then we have $2.4 million in our TSP that we can start to spend. So I did 8% on both of these examples and the time value of money example. If you happen to get 10% or 12%, well, then that's just going to be even more for you. 8% is pretty respectable. I would expect that you should at least get 8% in your investments if you just put it in an index fund, which I expect you all to do. So here's an example of how everyone So what you hear a lot is, well, you're not going to get rich in the military. Well, there's some truth to that, I suppose. You're not going to get super rich in the military, but you can be quite wealthy in the military, especially if you go the opposite route. The military pays their officers pretty well, in my opinion. And even the enlisted folks right out of high school, getting that much money is actually pretty good right out of high school for a job where they're going to train you for, they're going to give you a place to live, they're going to feed you. It's actually not bad. And then once you go up in ranks, it gets even better. So, and you add to that the right choices you make along the line. You could live on base. You could have a family and live on base in a base house where you don't have to pay rent. Well, that sounds good, right? But then you're not making equity into a house that you bought off base. So I've always bought my houses off base, and I've always sold them. I'm at a base for 4 or 5 years, something like that, and then I sell them. I make some money and go on to the next one. And so, but if I happen to have kept those houses and rented them, then I would have that much more passive income coming in. So this is all about making sure you have enough money to be comfortable, to provide for yourself, to provide for your family, to buy yourself some nice things, to enjoy your life. We're only here on this life. We only have one life here. We're on this planet for a short time. So we need to make sure that we do the most that we can to have a good time here and not be suffering unnecessarily. So part of that is making sure we're investing and having enough money in our accounts so that we can live healthy, happy, and wonderful lives. All right, so if you have any questions, put them in the comments, and I will talk to you guys next time.